Sanchez's back-to-back win shows he's serious about this season. But the first three tracks are nothing at all like Zandvoort. Tight and twisty, it'll keep the drivers busy. Let's see if he can make it a hat trick as we get ready to watch round 4 of the Lotus 49 Grand Prix Legends Series. And you'll see it all live here on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is IMSA driver Joey Atterbury. Behind the scenes is our director, Robert O'Brien, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Zandvoort fell into obscurity for a while after it lost the Dutch Grand Prix in the 80s, but its return in the last couple years has brought it back into the limelight. Let's head to our track eye to learn more. Welcome to Zandvoort. This track just to the west of Amsterdam fell into obscurity, but is getting new life in recent times thanks to a resurgence of Formula One fans in the country. Back in the mid-20th century, it hosted the Formula One Dutch Grand Prix for nearly 30 years. Granted, it was on a much faster and more flowing layout. Nowadays, the 5 different versions which are available to be run are mostly tight and technical. The shortest one is a little under a mile, while even the longest only stretches to a little over 2.5 miles. These tiny lengths, plus the narrowness of the track and its lack of long straights, make passing almost maddeningly difficult. The 2 most common spots are Tarzan, which is the first corner, and Hans Ernst, which is the final chicane. Even though it has recently been updated in the real world with more banking, even on the old track here on iRacing, it has an unusual amount of camber for a road course. The 2 aforementioned turns, along with Hugenholtz and Schieflock, allow drivers to carry more speed than you'd expect. It also gives drivers a chance to take slightly unusual lines. Like most old-school tracks, runoff is minimal. Mistakes in a few of the faster turns tend to allow no time for recovery and a big repair bill. Another unique quality is the fact that Zandvoort is literally next to the beach on the North Sea. Therefore, the sand easily blows its way onto the track surface and lessens grip. It's a tricky place to race, and even trickier circuit to win at. But with the beautiful surroundings, great history, and a mob of enthusiastic fans donning orange, you can't help but want to go visit this fantastic venue. Well, it's not quite like what we see now in modern day, because they did change it a couple years ago, Joey, and added more banking a couple spots, but it's still a tricky circuit.
It is a technical circuit with really your best passing opportunity going into turn 1 off of the long straightaway. But pretty much after that, single file, especially through the big banked turn number 3, and then it's just flowing corners up and over the crests of the hills. And you got to be careful because this racetrack, despite its numerous turns, can be very, very narrow at times. And when that racetrack is narrow, with these cars that stick out their wheels way out wide, you got to be careful with the overtaking opportunities. But the general idea of around here at Zandvoort, 13 turns, 2.67 miles out in the Netherlands, gaining more and more popularity with these Netherlands race car drivers coming from there.
Yeah, exactly. A two-time champion, two-time world champion does not hurt the popularity, no doubt. As for the championship, it's not a Dutch driver leading in Grand Prix Legends. Instead, it is Xavier Sanchez and Jorge Nieva, both Spanish drivers who are up at the top. Togo Hisada currently riding in 3rd. And, well, look at that. Jason Clapper is up to 4th overall, doing incredible this season. We'll see where he goes from here, because if he starts from the back at this track, might be a little bit harder going for him. Neil Kemp and Trangrade back there in 5th and 6th. In fact, it's a tie there between Ove and Benzoko at 58 points behind our leaders, in a tie between Maudsley and David Rossi as well for 8th and 9th. But we also track an F2 standings. Let's take a look at that.
Only difference between F1 and F2 is that I rating from the driver, and it's Steve Morris right now leading the way with 126 points. A nice 19-point gap over Bjorn Ackerman. But look at Bjorn, Andrew Eng, Jonathan Jordan, and Jan Steffen. Only a handful of points separate those 4 drivers. Then a little bit more of a gap, and then it closes back up back there with Terry Tromhauser, Paul Foster, Robert Reynolds locked into a battle. But I only see them doing 2 races so far. I have a feeling this F2 Drivers' Championship is going to take more shape as we get through the season.
Exactly. It tends to see a little bit more flux, that is for sure. Now, as for the Nations Cup, that one usually stays mostly the same. And Spain has been kind of dominating this season, as I just pointed out earlier on, because of the F1 championship. Togo Hisada trying to help Japan up. He's had a couple more Japanese drivers start to join him lately. The UK not too far behind, only 5 points difference between themselves and Japan. United States playing catch up, but there have Australia in hot pursuit here, within Germany and Norway in a very tight fight for sixth position. Let's go to today's race details. Joey, what do they have in store?
Round 4 of 12 that you were referencing earlier, they're going to do 21 laps around Zandvoort here. Open setups as always. Go join the community on the forums. They love sharing the good setups out there, get everyone up to speed. No spare car, so if you pick up any damage, you're going to have to live with it out there on the track. Drive-through penalty at 17x, disqualification at 25, but we mentioned it earlier. I just don't feel like the incident limits are going to play a part. It's more going to be the narrowness of the racetrack.
It really is. It's tough to keep it on the island here today. Now, they are currently in the midst of qualifying, but we haven't seen any times set quite yet. It does take a bit to get around here because unlike modern F1 cars, there's not really any downforce to speak of being produced on these machines. So all these twistier parts tend to slow the cars down a lot more. So we'll wait for them to complete the laps here, as it looks like John Olsen's going to be among the first to put one down, and Xavier Sanchez goes to provisional pole, but we still have a lot of drivers to come through. And with it being so tough to pass here, considering there is 40 plus on the track, Joey, I wonder how much traffic is going to be an issue.
Oh, I think it's going to be a big-time issue. I keep saying the narrowness of the racetrack. Well, when you come up to the lapped cars, guess what? They can't just remove themselves off of the racetrack. You have to navigate safely around them. So everybody has to play nice on the playground today.
Indeed. And much like we saw in IndyCar recently, the blue flags do not have the F1 style rules where you are required to absolutely leap out of the way. It's basically kind of at your leisure as long as you're not intentionally blocking the car behind. Meanwhile, Sanchez gets bumped down to second as Togo Hisada has taken the provisional pole. But John Olsen, who is among the first to set a time, is still well up there. He's about half a second off of pole. So what can he do on the second time around? Will we see improvement?
I know that we were talking about the dramas of lap traffic, but I don't want to take anything away from this community because they are so impressive with knowing what's coming up behind them. If they see the leaders, they usually are well aware of the fights coming up in the mirror.
You can see a lot less banking on that final corner with this older version of the track. Now, they do have a new scan that's coming up, and there is an improvement, 38-1, but Olsen is still only in third as Dario Frattini goes quicker. Sanchez also does as he comes up to second place once again, 8 thousandths behind Togo Hisada, who still has his second lap to finish here.
Togo coming up out of the final chicane, just got basically 2 long sweeping right-handers to go to round out this lap. It's always how you get out of that corner, because this right here is pretty much just kind of hang on, save the front right tire, pedal it with the accelerator.
Absolutely, and let's see if he's going to be quicker as he crosses the line. 37.3, puts himself 4/10 clear of Sanchez. If he can hold on to the lead at the start of this race, then he's got a good shot of keeping those guys behind. It's going to be very tough to try and get by. Laust Olsen puts himself to 8th. That's pretty good, and also critical. His first lap got deleted, Joey.
Oh, that is important that Laust is able to start up inside the top 10, because with 40 cars out here, it's just going to be traffic central if you have to start way in the back.
Seb Tixier still needs to set a time. Oh, he's missed both of his laps. Sebastian Tixier is going to start from the back of the field. 2-time champion and current reigning champion, if anything. So he's going to have a heck of a time trying to see what he can do. He'll certainly be trying to one-up Jason Clapper that he's going to be starting with back there once again. Jorge Nieva, by the way, second in the point standings. He is down in fifth, which could mean trouble between himself and Sanchez, since those two are trying to fight for the points lead. As looks like we've got pretty much everybody with a time down. Yep, it looks like nobody else can set a time from here. So let's go through our starting order. Togo Hisada on the pole position as Xavier Sanchez will start next to him. Togo coming in from third in the points here. Nacho Gaspar. Now, that is a name I'm not as familiar with, so I'm not sure if he's raced with us before, but Dario Frattini has, and he'll start from fourth today. Jorge Nieva down in fifth is flanked by John Olson, who looked fast initially, but gets shuffled down a little bit. Glenn Becker will be P7, as Lau Stolson will start eighth and Benzoko ninth. Kyle Ridley, who had a podium in his very first attempt last time out, will start from 10th today.
In 11th here, we have Matthew Maudsley. 12th place, David Rossi. On row number 7, it's Gary Ho and Robert Plumley. Marco Antonio Lopez Salgado in 15th. Yosun Lee in 16th. Victor Morayan in 17th. Neil Kemp 18th. And then Nicholas Morelli and Jeff Saunders on row 10.
Bjorn Ackerman starts 21st with Paul Foster in the 22nd position. Cam Porter starts from P23, followed by Steve Morris in 24th. Michael Grissinger in the quarter century marks has Torsten Bell in the spot next to him. Jan Steffen in that F2 championship will start from 27th today. Then it's Andre Bruno 28th and Terry Traumhauser in 29th. Robert Abroda will round out your top 30.
And we have Derek Matthews and Jonathan Jordan here in 32nd. Jason Clapper starting from the back in 33rd. Yuri Giesen, 34th. Tomas Tuba, 35th. Kirk Clapper, 36th. Andrew Eng back here, 37th. Mats Linden. Then Sebastian Tixier in 39th. Jason Merrifield in 40th. And Akira Shimitori in 41st.
41 cars trying to navigate around here, and pretty decent conditions, just under 80 Fahrenheit on the track surface. But the big thing here is very little wind, which is a bit unusual because it's literally right next to the sea there on the other side. The beach is just on the other side of the hill where you've got the main grandstand. So usually you get a lot of sand being blown across this track and grip is low, but it looks like that is not a problem today. In fact, they go all the way back to Lyondike there, the final corner, and weave around that a little bit. Hopefully that won't be an issue, as it looks like, nope, we don't have Salgado gridded up yet. We're still waiting on himself and Kurt Clapper to find their way onto the grid here. Once they do, they will start to get the signal as the lights will come on. And they've only got a few seconds left, honestly, so we might see some cars start from pit lane. Time now runs out, so that's it. Looks like the engines will start to rev as the lights come up for round 4 of the Grand Prix Legends Series. And the green flag is out, and Laust Olsen has an absolutely horrible start back there as he gets swallowed up, but his Sada looks pretty good. Sanchez is not able to challenge him down into Tarzan. Somebody's had a big accident in the midfield, and cars are going to have to scatter to try and get around them. Unfortunately, this is causing yet more problems, and there is a big stack up.
I think it was Yunsu Lee getting into Marco Antonio Salgado, I believe, and more cars off track. I believe I see the number 22 involved in this one. Several cars. We mentioned how narrow this racetrack is, already biting in turns 1, 2, and 3.
We'll have to come back and take a look at that later. That was the number 16 car there, Lee, that we think may have been at the beginning of it, but we'll get a better look a little later. In the meantime, Hisada leads Sanchez. Gaspar back there in third is followed by Jorge Nieva, who gains 1 from the start.
And I tell you what, I was watching Seb Tixier in the back. He managed to get his way through, then he spun, and now he's got damage. Unfortunately, Tixier, I think, is going to be done for the day.
It's a real shame. But he said before, once he won his first championship, he wasn't really as concerned about winning those. He's just out here to have some fun. So maybe that's what's... Oh, we've got a car off up at the front. It looks like Dario Frattini has plowed into the wall there, down into the braking of Hans Ernst.
think this was all by himself over here. Joe, we're not even done with lap number 1 here, and I feel like I'm reading through a pretty big attrition list.
Yeah, same here. So here's Frattini. I didn't see contact. I don't know if there was, but the car just is suddenly in the wall here, coming down to braking, and he does indeed lose it on his own. It steers over to the left on him, and that's it.
It's tough. Cold tires. I love talking about tires, but no downforce on these. You get on the brakes, especially with the weight transferred over to the right side, and I just think it caught Dario off guard a little bit.
Well, our regular hard chargers apparently, or expected hard chargers, are not going to be the ones giving us the action because Jason Clapper has had an issue as well. So he and Seb Tixier, who we thought would be charging through the field, are sent to the back here by the end of lap 1. And there is Clapper heading down into Tarzan now with a lot of work to do. I don't think he actually hit the wall, but he did find himself cycling back to the tail end of the field once again. Well, some dramatic turns of events here at the start of this race, but up at the front, not a lot of huge changes. It's still Hesada, Sanchez, Gaspar, who I believe are still where they started.
They started, and I'm actually been pretty impressed with Nacho Gaspar up here in 3rd place. He has attached himself to the back of Xavier Sanchez as we're watching a little bit further back, and here's the number 2 of Gaspar. You see Sanchez really wiggle the tail coming up out of that final chicane, but Gaspar showing pretty good pace here at the beginning.
Not seeing him on the list of stats, but we don't have number of starts on here, so he may have actually run races, but I'm not finding his names in any significant results so far. So Sanchez still chasing away as he wants to try and get this away from Hesada, but Gaspar, like you said, putting the pressure on, making sure that he stays honest.
Well, and I tell you what, if Gaspar doesn't do this and tell Sanchez to get up and go, Togo Hesada is just going to continue to run away from this group. You see Togo already stretching his legs down the road.
Exactly, and that's probably what Hesada will want to do here. Like we said, traffic could become an issue. We've lost a number of cars, but many of them have gotten back out on track after taking a few repairs and are continuing once again, which will just mean that they get to that traffic even quicker, unfortunately.
More problems with cars. I think I saw Yuri Giesen with some problems out on the racetrack. And I agree, Joe, just the more the field gets spread out, the quicker these leaders are going to run into that lap traffic. However, if Togo can continue to build this gap, it gives them a little bit of a buffer area.
Absolutely. The buffer's up to 1.6 seconds. Curious if we've got a replay of that incident at the beginning to see if we can untangle some of that a little bit, because that did happen quite high up the field, and that collected a lot of important figures, that one. So let's see if we can get that spooled up. And I know you had a little bit better look. You said Lee was perhaps the one that kind of started it all?
I mean, yeah, when you put 41 cars on the front straightaway, some things are going to get a little bit crazy on the start. And there you see Lee already turned around in turn 1 and the chaos going on, but it really happened in the brake zone going down into turn 1. That's where the initial damage happened. There you see Tixier going up through the middle. Look at that, Joe.
Already taking a lot of spots, but yeah, there's the 15 as well. That's Robert Plumley. He didn't even get a chance as he's out of this race quickly. Looks like the 26 going to get turned around as well and get a big hit.
Yeah, you see Lee just get into the back of Plumley, and I think maybe Plumley was just being a little bit hesitant. Lee was on full charge, 2 different mindsets going into turn 1, and unfortunately, they combined and clattered.
That's Neil Kemp in the 13, unfortunately. He did get to the outside of the track and backed out of the way, so that prevented him more damage. But again, a lot of lost time right there, unfortunately. So sad to see a lot of these drivers have a bit of a rough start, but at least we've still got what looks like around 36 drivers that are still on track right now. We're with John Olsen in the meantime in the number 6. He's racing 5th position, chasing on Jorge Nieva.
Cars we haven't mentioned yet, but both good runs out of these 2 in the top 5. Nieva and Olsen, always one of our two regular competitors out here in the Lotus 49s.
Absolutely. And both have been race winners now as well. So not as many as we've seen as some of our more successful drivers, but they've dipped their toes into the wells of success. And can they keep getting them wet out here? As Hisada has now had the fastest lap as well, with a 137.6 this time by. In fact, the first driver we've seen hit the 137s in this race.
When we were talking about him just a lap or two ago, the gap was only about 1.4 seconds. Well, just in the matter of those 2 laps, he's already gapped it out to 2.5 seconds and growing. How much can he build that gap? Because the more is better when it comes to getting by the lap traffic.
Here's one of our webcams that we've got, Glenn Becker, giving us a feed. And in fact, there's 3 of them right there. We've got Cam Porter today, Bjorn Ackerman, Laust Olsen, and Glenn Becker. But I believe Olsen may have been involved in some stuff. I'm trying to remember. No, he did not. Laust Olsen's still running 6th, actually, so he's just ahead of this. But Glenn Becker running in 7th right now. And I do know that Bjorn Ackerman had a bit of an off earlier on. I'm not sure how Cam Porter is doing after that craziness at the start, if he picked up places or if he got tangled in it. But we'll try and bring back those cameras in a bit. Sounds like we've got a little bit of a technical issue, but we'll do our best to see if we can have those up once again.
Check out this pack here, and it's even starting in front of Glenn Becker, because you go up to the battle that we were covering. I think this all starts maybe up here with Nieva, Olsen, Becker, Zoko, Rossi, Ridley, and Maudsley. I mean, almost 10 cars in a big train.
You're right. And we kind of wondered if this would be the case, if someone who's not quite as fast on race pace starts holding people up. That could get tricky. Well, not for Jorge Nieva. Oh, excuse me, that's Jonathan Jordan who just passed up there. He overtook a lapped car, actually, that pink machine in the number 30, which starts our now lap traffic starting to get overtaken by the drivers. He's being approached by Glenn Becker, and Nacho is still hounding Sanchez up here. We've switched back to this battle for 2nd place. The number 3 and the number 2 have just been glued at the hip.
And I don't think this is a case of Gaspar hanging on the back in the slipstream. I don't think that this circuit really tends to do that here. So I feel like Gaspar has good pace in the car. I'm curious if he can get in front of Sanchez. Is he faster?
Good point. And while Sanchez's battle is not with Gaspar, he is trying to fight Hisada in the points. So he probably doesn't want to give this one up. He's already given up points to Hisada if he finishes behind him today. So he's got to fight hard, and he's still got a lot of laps to go.
What I like out of this number 2 car in the 3rd position is that he doesn't seem to be driving very aggressively. He's not poking his nose into the brake zones, tempting Sanchez that I'm going to make a pass here. He's just slowly, methodically hanging out right behind him, waiting for the right opportunity.
Psychological warfare here. Just letting him know that he's there, staying in those mirrors, and making sure that Sanchez can't make any mistakes here as they start lap 7 now. And they are pulling away from Nieva behind them. It's about 2.5 seconds back there. So they are separating, but unfortunately that's of little comfort to the number 3.
Through this turn 3, which has more banking now, which was what you were saying. Hopefully get that update sooner than later here on iRacing, and then up through these over crest sweeping turns. This is really where you let the car kind of run free.
Yeah, you know, sometimes I'm not as keen on updates for some tracks, because a lot of times that means a lot of paved runoff, and that's just not as much fun to me. But this is a track I'm really looking forward to with the changes, with all the banking and crazy things that they did to update it for F1. But here coming through one of the new-ish parts, as it used to be a much quicker track, as they weave through the infield section, back-to-back hairpins, and then it's a blast up over a crest down to the chicane.
And Joe, I'll give iRacing credit. When they do update a track, they don't get rid of the old stuff. They pretty much legacy it, and it's still available for you to go and race. So it's not like we're going to lose old Zandvoort here. We're just going to gain a new edition.
Watkins Glen and VIR fans have something to say to you about that. Anyways, as we come back here to Laust Olsen chasing on John Olsen, but Glenn Becker behind them. Looks like he's running away a little bit from Ben Zoko, although they have not completely separated. You still got a bit of a train, but they're starting to get some space to run their own race here.
And I think this is kind of the point in the race where the drivers are starting to get comfortable in their own rhythm, in their own pace on the racetrack. And that can tend to lead to maybe a little bit of wandering of the mind out there. You got to be careful not to wander too much and make any mistakes.
Glenn Becker's eyes are what's wandering around in his VR headset as he races in this 7th position. Looks like he is pretty steady and calm here, not looking all that frantic. In fact, pretty good smooth motions, it seems, on the wheel.
Joe, you mentioned eyes in VR, and I think that reverb is just begging for some googly eyes on the front of it.
Exactly. I'm trying to remember who it is in the Camel series that tends to have that on his, but Jamie Hamill-Smith, we're hearing. Thank you to our director for that little bit of information. There's a lot of drivers to remember when you're a sim racing commentator. Meanwhile, we might want to go back to Nacho. You said he wasn't poking his nose. I think that's changed. He's starting to show himself a little bit more.
And I think that these two cars are fast in two different ends of the racetrack. I feel that Sanchez is able to get through these sweeping corners and off onto the front straight pretty decently. But after turn 3, I feel like that's where Nacho Gaspar really just starts to turn it up over Sanchez.
Exactly. And one thing I do like is it looks like that Nacho's using one of there was a time where the drivers used old IndyCar liveries on these things when they would run ovals. And yeah, it looks like that's what he's got on it, is one of those back from the 60s era that you can always tell because F1 cars didn't have all the contingency sponsors all over the side, kind of NASCAR style.
No, it's interesting that you point that out because you're right. You look at the specific livery and all the stickers, all the contingency sponsors, all the businesses that have helped put this race car out on the racetrack, they're all represented. However, you go over to F1 and vintage liveries and really even into current F1 liveries, they are much more slim in their design.
Exactly. And right now, looks like slim pickings for Nacho because he's still not able to quite get by Sanchez despite being very close. But he's got time. It's on his side. In fact, that was a great exit right there coming out of turn 8. Let's see if this is going to be enough to try and make an attack down into Hans Ernst. He thinks about it, but decides no.
And I mentioned it. I think that Nacho's really good in this back half of the racetrack. And now what we're going to see is Sanchez start to scoot away just a little bit through these two fast sweeping right-hand corners. But Joe, just on the horizon, I'm already seeing lapped traffic.
Oh, boy. Fans of John Olsen, bad news. He had a spin and has fallen back. And in fact, Marco Salgado had the same incident just now. But let's take a look at Olsen's incident first. Too hot into Hans Ernst, and he just could not save it.
Such a tricky corner because you're hard on the brakes, yet you also have to get it slowed up and turned. And thankfully, John Olsen was able to get the car completely stopped before rolling back out onto the racetrack. I think a narrow miss from Laust Olsen in the yellow car.
I think Salgado had pretty much a carbon copy of that in the number 12. He falls down to 16th. Olsen is down in 12th. Now back to Gaspar. Here is that lap traffic you talked about. Steve Morris just up ahead of him, caught up in that opening incident. He's usually a front runner. I think he knows what they go through. And indeed, there it is. As soon as he sees him, he pulls out of the way.
The more I've been watching, though, this corner right here, this left-hander, Joe, Gaspar gets out of it very well. He seems to put the power down more than Sanchez can. Little bit more of an even run between the two coming out this time.
Wonder if that'll keep Sanchez from having to worry about an attack. He's awful close, that number 2. And no, there will not be an attack down into Hans Ernst, but much tighter down to the apex in that number 2 machine, continuing to put the pressure on there. About 5 seconds behind Hisada. It's been mostly a battle for best of the rest today.
Well, and if the number 2 car can stay close here to Sanchez, he just needs to start picking away at it inch by inch, and you can tell Sanchez feeling the heat, making the snake move down the front straightaway to try to break any draft or any slipstream that Gaspar has. But tell you what, this is the closest Nacho's been.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's where it winds up happening. That run down into Tarzan, really probably the only straightaway that they've got, at least in these cars. There's some other corners that are flat out in most cars, but not in these things. So basically you're stuck with just that turn 1 entry.
And I think that it's more about putting the power down coming out of these slow corners, because if Sanchez has any sort of wheel slip or misshift, Gaspar is going to be right there. I think that's a great opportunity. However, you have to be close enough to take advantage.
Absolutely. Back into the infield once again as it twists around through the sand dunes here amongst the Netherlands, here at Zandvoort. And I got to say, I'm very, very impressed. I believe we've seen Nacho racing before. I'm almost certain that I recognize that name. But regardless, with how long it's been since we've seen him on a broadcast race and the level that the top of the field runs in this series, I can't believe that he's been as smooth and as patient as he's been this whole race.
I think that it's starting to unravel just a touch, and if Nacho's a smart racer, he's going to adjust his line just a little bit. He was able to reel in Sanchez, but now it seems like he's struggling coming off of the corner exits a little bit. I'm watching him adjust his line. He's jumping up over the curbs a little, just trying to find any sort of advantage, and I think it's actually starting to overheat the rear tires of his.
Can be a problem in these cars. Not as common, but obviously, you don't lose the tread, but they will overheat, like you heard Joey mention, if you just abuse them too much and spin up those wheels. As they now climb the hill over Hoensrug and into Slotemacher. This is the part I was talking about. Most cars, you can keep your foot flat to the floor. And these things, not quite. You have to give tiny little lifts to make it through there.
Well, and Nacho's just confident in the car and it moving around underneath him. He gained 2 car lengths alone through that section, Joe. I just think Nacho is very comfortable.
Certainly looks like it. And if they start battling, I said that they were running away from Nieva. Well, they haven't anymore. It's still at 2.5 seconds between them. So I think if they start losing time squabbling over P2, Nieva is right there to try and pick up the pieces.
That is a great point. Nieva, kind of a little bit of a lonely race, but he can see that carrot just out in front of him, just 2 seconds up the road, pretty much 1 corner. So he can judge if he's gaining time, if he's staying level with them, and he's got the bit between his teeth for sure.
Earlier we were mentioning who is going to be the hard charger in this race. So far it looks like Mats Linden has the most positions, up from 38, so 13 gained by him, but we've jumped into the middle of the pack with Laust Olsen being chased by Becker and Zoko. Among these, Laust Olsen actually has the most positions gained, 3 up for him, and is trying to keep from losing at least 2 of those. It doesn't look like it's quite close enough for a pass right now, but they're certainly there.
This group of 3, remember, they had that close call. I believe it was John Olsen that spun in front of them. They were all just barely avoiding into that chicane there. So I think all 3 happy to still be racing. And I got to give a shout out to that 22. I'm a huge aviation enthusiast, and I know that's a Pitts special livery. So I love seeing basically an airplane on the racetrack.
Absolutely. In fact, kind of interesting that we've got 2 of our onboard cams right here between Laust and Glenn. And right now, Glenn may be a little bit more worried about what's behind him as it's getting awful close with Ben Zoko. And he's starting to put the pressure on, taking a bit of a peek through the left-hander. That is always an interesting spot where I've seen cars try it, but rarely actually execute the passes.
Just need Ben to make it to the end of the race with enough tire on the back of that thing to show off his burnout skills. But right now, he's focused on trying to get up by Glenn Becker and Laust Olsen. And Joe, this is a battle for the top 5.
That's a good point, yeah. Laust Olsen currently holding the last of those top 5 positions. So contested by these three. What's interesting is usually we see Zoko in a spot where he's defending, and he's kind of notorious for that. He's hard to pass. So he's on the opposite side of the coin here today, trying to make the overtakes. I'm curious to see how he's going to fare.
And combine that just kind of with the attitude of all of these drivers. You look at this pack from, let's see here, Nieva all the way back into 11th with Gary Ho. They're all up position, so they are all on the charge. They are not on the back foot by any means.
Ooh, we've had another massive accident for Hyun-Soo Lee. Amazingly, he did not pit after that big wreck at the start. Didn't need it, but he has plowed into the wall, and I'm pretty sure he is absolutely done now because the car is crabbing pretty significantly there.
It looks like some broken rear suspension bits on that number 16. Going to have to definitely take the tow back to pit road. But one thing's for sure, these three, not much separating them.
Well past the halfway mark into this race, and coming down to the left-hander once again, who can get the power down, try and get the traction on this sandy circuit. It looks like Lars Olsen will keep himself out of range, at least for the time being. Oh, Zoko with a big look down to the inside of Hans Ernst, but he once again was not close enough.
It's actually going to cost him just a little bit of track position. These three kind of gap out evenly now to about a half a second apiece, and we can take a little bit of a breather. Joe, I want to mention how awesome Togo is performing today. I wouldn't say that I'm surprised by this, but lots of times he's locked into a battle, and sometimes we see one or two of them escape away. Well, today is Togo's day to just run away with it all.
And consider his performances so far. He had a bit of a rough start. Had a wreck, which, if I recall, I don't think it was his fault at Monza. Just got a little bit tangled up. Motorsport didn't perform as well as he would have liked. I think also had an incident that sent him backwards. And then Sandown, he managed to second place. So he did kind of recover a little bit there. But getting his first win of the season will probably make him extremely happy to be back on the horse.
It's great for confidence, and it's great just to leave everybody in the dust out there. You log on to the session, you're the fastest one in there, go show it to everybody.
And as I'd been saying last week leading up into this, track position's so important here, and he's basically dealt with that from the get-go and has made it a non-issue, if anything, being so far away from everybody. As Nacho Gasper is discovering just how annoying it can be stuck behind a car that you think you're faster than. But like I said, to his credit, incredible patience so far, hasn't done anything risky. But at what point, Joey, does he need to try and start to make some moves?
You're right. The timer is starting to run out. You look at the laps here, and just like that, it was halfway. Now it's 3/4 of the way through the race. So it's got to be getting time. I think if I was in Gaspar's position, I would at least start showing the nose in areas, even if you're not trying to make the move. Just make Sanchez look in his mirror, make him do a little bit something different, and it might throw off his rhythm eventually.
I don't know where Nacho hails from specifically. He is Club Iberia, which is always a tricky one because that includes both Portugal and Spain. But if he is Spanish, then that means we've got 3 out of the top 4, again, hailing from Spain. I don't know what has brought that country to the forefront this season so quickly, because we have seen a couple of them be quick lately, but this season it's been almost always a couple of them amongst the top 5, just showing how fast they've become.
Here we go. More lapped traffic just in front of him. I see this is the number 41 of Derek Matthews pulling off to the side of the road, getting out of the way, but we got some more just up the racetrack. Yeah,
Kira Shimatori is the next one. Actually done a pretty good job. He's up 11 positions. Failed to set a qualifying time, but has been basically keeping out of trouble, and a lot of times that can do you a lot of good. Considering that big wreck at the beginning, that handed over a lot of places to that number 40 machine. But what's this going to be like with these two battling for position? Nicely done. Look at that. Perfect timing to get out of the way.
Yeah, and I also like that because it's not giving a draft to Sanchez going down the straightaway. He just stepped aside completely from the battle and says, you know what, Sanchez, Gaspar, this is really your battle.
So trying not to affect it in any way possible, especially when he knew he didn't have anybody he was fighting with directly. Shimitori continues on, as so does this fight for P2. Sanchez, I don't think we've really seen him put much of a foot wrong during this race. I'm trying to recall if we've seen any big slip-ups or major incidents, and I can't really see any in my notes.
No, and I think that's why he's held second position so strongly over Gaspar. I don't think that Gaspar has really gone up there and challenged him on the brakes, but he has literally been attached to the gearbox the entire time. Probably wants a little bit of an oxygen filter after breathing in all those exhaust fumes all race, Joe.
Exactly. Especially in these older cars where not nearly as efficient. Oh. Meanwhile, down to the inside, this is where we first see a serious move. And it's a big try, but not a successful one. Nacho at least got a taste of it.
But Joe, this is closer than he's been coming into this final chicane. And I really do feel that sometimes it's not about making the pass, but just throwing off the rhythm. Do something different.
So there's the sign that he's done waiting around. And will this cause some mistakes that we were wondering Sanchez would be making, or if he's going to be able to remain cool here today? That's not the best run we've seen out of Lyondike from Gaspar, so not going to be close enough down the front stretch to try anything, but he's going to at least once again remind him that he's there.
When you asked me, when is the time to start attacking? Well, I think Gaspar says now is the time to start attacking, especially since they've pulled it about another second over Jorge Nieva. That's something we didn't think about. Maybe he just wanted to get away a little bit more before mounting the charge.
Absolutely, yeah. So 3-second gap gives him a little bit more breathing space, some comfort to know that if something goes awry with the pass, he's not handing it over as quickly. Look at him climb those curbs up there. Meanwhile, down through Hugenholtz, this is Kyle Ridley. Glad to see him back. You said it's difficult down in Australia because of the timing of these races. It's kind of late at night at an awkward hour. But he has returned and still has the highest I rating. That's something that I didn't notice. Number 1 on that car, although he's running 9th today, so not quite as good as what we saw back at more of a home track with Sandown.
No, but he's right on the back of David Rossi right now, and so definitely potential for more positions gained. And if we remember, I'm sorry, that's actually Matthew Maudsley right there in the blue car. I thought it was Zoko that he was battling with.
Yeah, Zoko's still back there with Glenn Becker, although they've lost touch with Laust Olsen, so Laust has done a good job kind of responding to them and stretching away. So we are seeing things kind of fan out in the mid-pack here just outside of the top 5 amongst many that have been fighting for a good chunk of this race. Ridley experiencing quite a bit of pressure from Maudsley now. Let's see if Matthew's able to do anything. I think he slipped up a little bit there in Lyondike.
It's just not quite long enough of a straightaway to really get reeled back in with the slipstream, so going to have to look for another opportunity. And Joe, I know that you mentioned the big movers earlier. A little bit of a comical point. Jason Clapper has risen from the dead.
Where is he right now, actually?
He's up 13. He's not our biggest mover so far. It still belongs, I believe, to Mats Linden, but Clapper's right on the back of Ackerman. He's definitely up there threatening again.
After seeing him 4th in the points, though, I'm sure he's going to be a little bit frustrated with himself because the 20th is probably not going to make him as happy. Yeah, Mats Linden with 15 up right now is gained the most from 38th. At this point, Bjorn Ackerman, another one of our onboards here today, up 2 as we watch over his right shoulder. This is definitely one of the trickier parts of the track with the barriers very close around you.
This is that banked turn number 3 complex, one of the slower turns on the racetrack, and then it's accelerate up through the gears, through these sweeping over crest. And look at the suspension, how much it travels up over the curbs and crests.
Yeah, that turn 3 named Hugenholtz mistakenly identified as the man who designed this track. I actually didn't know this until a couple years ago. He actually just tweaked this track. It was already around, and he kind of made a few changes to it back in its original form. But still, he is considered one of the architects here, if you will, and his name is still held in some reference. Also designed Suzuka is the one he's probably most well known for.
A little bit of an Edison move here, huh?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of describing it. Meanwhile, this battle here for second place is still very tight. And as they come down into Shivlock, one of the faster right-hand corners, a lot of banking through that one as well. Look at them weave to try and line up the car. And Gaspar is running out of time. He's got 2 laps to go, more like 1.5 at this stage.
This is the area of the racetrack where Gaspar has definitely been faster. He shows the nose down to the inside, realizes doesn't have the room to make it there, has to focus on the corner exit. But here goes Sanchez, puts the power down nicely.
By the way, just as an update, Clapper did get Ackerman and has passed him now. Oh, and down, cutting the corner. That was Gaspar going through, and he's going to give up the fight here as he's going to have to give back time as he went straight through Hans Ernst, and Sanchez on the last lap will get the breather he has been desiring.
Yeah, tip of the cap to Nacho Gaspar, though, because I noticed as soon as he got on the brakes, he realized he was in way too deep. He was right behind Sanchez. He lifted off the brakes, Joe, avoided completely to not take out Xavier Sanchez in that battle.
Very gentlemanly move there from the number 2. At least they'll get a podium today, and I do think credit needs to be given to both these drivers. Incredible race from the pair of them, and it's just that one mistake that undid it for Nacho after both of them looked pretty darn flawless for the rest of the race. Same thing with Hisada. He hasn't had the cameras on him, so we can't really know how flawless this one was, but he is up to 8 seconds over Sanchez, looking for his first win of the season and potentially a 3rd championship here. Remember, he came into this one 3rd in the points, and this is going to do him no harm.
Well, and I mean, I look at the outright speed of Hisada, one of the only cars in the 1 minute 37-second bracket, and by far clear of the rest of the field by 0.3. There is no challenging this man today.
Unfortunately for him, it's only going to gain him 5 points on Sanchez, but that's still 5 points that Sanchez did not claim over him, and the gap will tighten as Togo brings it through Kumho and just Lyondike to go. A lot less banking in this version, so you got to be real careful on the throttle in these cars as he gets up to speed and brings it to the main straight, celebrating his first win of Season 3.
Now, as see Xavier Sanchez comes through the final corner, he will finish second. Nacho Gaspar just behind him, rounding out your podium here at Zandvoort.
Nicely done, as Nieva, unfortunately, not quite what I'm sure he wanted today, but the 4th place is going to be a good point scoring day at the very least. Laust Olsen coming in not far behind him with an excellent top 5, and Zoko will wind up in 6th, getting ready to do his traditional burnouts that he loves to do here. It's been a tight fight in some places. Rossi beat Ridley by 0.2 of a second back there, and I believe it wound up being less than a second between Olsen and Zoko as well. So yeah, definitely some cars that came home very tight together.
I'm looking, it looks like Jason Clapper is able to move up one more position, up 14. So now he's tied with biggest mover between himself and Mats Linden back there. Just incredible from that number 11. Also great drive here from the number 35 of Mats Linden. Like you mentioned, though, probably not the points day Jason Clapper wanted.
Sad news at the very last lap. Grissinger and Giesen unfortunately had it coming together and are kind of limping to the line here as Mats Linden will be 24th in the end. And I think that is going to wrap us up. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with the official results as well as driver interviews. So make sure and stick around. Welcome back to Zandvoort. Round 4 of the Grand Prix Legends Series sees Togo Hisada take his first win of Season 3 ahead of Sanchez by about 8 seconds. It looked like he pretty much had this one under control for most of the way. Sanchez, though, had a lot of pressure there. Nacho Gaspar, who finished behind him by about 2 seconds, was a lot closer for the vast majority. Really only lost it with about a lap and a half to go. Jorge Nieva gets himself a 4th place, but was really never in the hunt as Laust Olsen finished 5th today. Then Ben Zoko, who was kind of chasing him for much of it, found himself finishing 6th. Glenn Becker, tight behind him, was P7. David Rossi with a bit of a quiet run there to 8th as Kyle Ridley finishes P9. Not as impressive as his first start, but still a good solid one. And Matthew Maudsley gets himself a top 10.
Here in 11th, we have Gary Ho. John Olsen with the early spin finishes in 12th. Dario Frantini there falls down to 13th. Victor Morayan in 14th. Marco Antonio Salgado with a top 15 finish. Jeff Saunders here in 16th. Paul Foster 17th. Neil Kemp 18th. Jason Clapper up 14 positions. Not our biggest mover today, though, finishes 19th. Bjorn Ackerman with a top 20 finish.
Andre Bruno was 21st, followed by Andrew Ang in 22nd. Then it's Torsten Bell in the 23rd spot. Mats Linden, the hardest charger. It was Andrew Ang, the hardest charger. Yeah, up 15. But still, Mats Linden up 14 there into 24th. Yuri Giesen up to 25th as Thomas Tuba finishes 26th today. And Grissinger did get home on the lead lap, but last car to do so as he limped it across the line in 27th. Kurt Clapper was 28th, Terry Traumhauser 29th, and Akiro Shimatori, starting last on the field, finished 30th today.
Just 2 more cars, 1 lap down, Derek Matthews and Cam Porter. Then you have Jonathan Jordan 2 laps down, Jan Steffen, Steve Morris, and then we get down to the DNFs down here. Sue Lee, Nicholas Morelli, Oborta, Merrifield, and Tixier. I guess Plumley as well was our 41 cars. Impressive field today, Joe.
Very impressive. Didn't start out as many would have hoped, but at least we saw some good racing after that as Togo Hisada didn't see much of that racing. He was up in the lead the entire time. Togo, we talk sometimes about drivers having momentum, and here coming from a second to a win after those first 2 races not going so well, this has got to feel good.
Yeah, really good. It was because the best experience I've ever had. Yeah, today it was like being very deep zone. I seem to be haunted by something. Setups very good, and the pace is unbelievable. I can imagine. I didn't expect it this day. So yeah, really fun, very good. Yeah, so happy.
That pace came in handy here. We talked a lot about how difficult it is to pass. Did you do extra practice to try and find that pace, or does this place just click with you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't practice a lot today because driving school or something in the midday. So still I can imagine, I can expect it for the pace I had today.
Well, from here we head off to a new track on iRacing, Willow Springs. That one a lot more fast, sweeping corners around there. Are you looking forward to it? Have you tried it in the Lotus yet?
Not yet. So yeah, really looking forward to try the track. Yeah, this is a historical track, so yeah, I think really it will really suit to Lotus 49. So yeah, really looking forward to next week.
Expect the car to get light in a few places over the hills, so it'll be fun. Congratulations, Togo, on the win, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Togo Hisada, your victor there from pole, lights the flag as behind him. Laust Olsen gets himself a top 5, and Joey is caught up with him.
Laust, congratulations on the 5th place finish today at Zandvoort.
Thank you. That was a little bit surprising. but I had a good race and didn't make any big mistakes, so that was okay, and gained a little with people in front getting into trouble. So that's also what's happened.
It seemed like your race was a little slow to start off, kind of a little lonely for the first handful of laps, and then you had a card. John Olsen spun right in front of you in that final chicane. Talk to me about that close call and avoiding him. You did a great job.
Yeah, first of all, I messed up a little bit in qualifying. I think I should have been perhaps a couple of tenths faster and a little, perhaps also a place or two further up the grid. But I then was falling asleep at the start, and Ben got by me. Luckily, I could fight back the next couple of corners and pass him again. And then I had really many troubles with the chicane during the first laps, and finally got that sorted. And then John had his, looked like he had trouble in that chicane also. But he kept it nice in the inside after he spun. So there was time enough to react and pass him on the outside without losing a place to those behind. Glenn and Ben caught me honest the entire race. It was quite a pressure to have them that close all the way. But
Well, that was what I was going to ask you next, actually, Laus. Is how much pressure were you feeling between Ben and Glenn Becker behind you? It seemed like you had good pace out there, but they were still right on the gearbox.
Yeah, they. I think we were quite evenly matched pace-wise. Sometimes I got a little air between us, but then usually I would, I don't know, lose focus a little and have a bad lap, losing half a second again, and then suddenly they would be right behind me again. So it was a little bit give and take, depending on, I think, who made small errors when and where. But I know raced both of them quite a lot, and they are fair racers, so but also very fast. So just have to avoid the mistakes, and I was pretty sure that none of them would do anything stupid, but still had to keep an eye open because they are quite capable, and I'm not the best on the brakes. So it was quite sweating a lot now. It was quite a tough race.
Well, you said it yourself. You weren't happy with qualifying, Laus. You made up for it in the race, up 3 positions with the top 5. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much.
That was Laus Olsen, your 5th place finisher here at Zandvoort.
Down in 32nd, a bit of a rough day for Cam Porter from the very start. Cam, you got caught up in that accident down into turn 1. It almost, from what I saw back on my replay when I went back and watched here, looked like you were very close to getting through.
Yeah, a lot of guys slow down, to their credit, just trying to avoid all the mess, but obviously cars were still flying everywhere, and it was difficult to get, it's short of stopping on the track. I'm not sure I could have avoided what happened there, but I didn't want to completely come to a stop either because there's still cars behind me. But yeah, I was just about to weave through it, and I didn't see Steve Maurice was on my right, and he was blocking my view. I couldn't see another car that was spinning there, and Steve hit them, and obviously I couldn't swerve quickly enough to get out of the way, but that gave my car damage. Unfortunately, it was grabbing a little bit, so I took about a minute's worth of repairs and just got back on track to try to minimize the damage.
Yeah, I saw that you spent a lot of time just kind of trundling around, wound up only 1 lap down. All things considered, only losing 1 lap, probably not as bad as things could have been.
That's right. I was surprised I only had 1 minute worth of repairs, but it still wasn't completely repaired. The car was still, steering wheel was still a little bit sideways, but it was drivable for sure, and it just didn't have the pace of the fast guys, obviously, but I feel like I could have been inside the top 20 at least today if things had gone a little better. But looking forward to next week in Willow Springs, the new track. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're ready to embrace your inner James Dean and get some classic California racing going?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's actually one of the only tracks I've actually been stood on. So kind of looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming and chatting with us. Hopefully we'll see you have a better week next week.
Thanks, Josie.
That was Cam Porter finishing 32nd today, which is going to wrap us up. So a big thank you goes out to the Lotus 49 community for bringing us back for another season of coverage. Also, thanks to the team today, Rob, Joey, and Dougie. Make sure to check out our social media, our website, and our merchandise store. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a moment. As we've been saying, Willow Springs, brand new track coming up next week, Saturday, July 15th, 9:30 a.m. Eastern. So be sure to not only check out that, but our other broadcasts that we have listed here, because Camel GT is going to be up next at 1 p.m. Eastern over at Le Mans. That'll be fun. Until next time, though, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.